with that, let us get into the conversation today. I'd like to invite Kelly up here. Looking forward to this discussion today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank Uday and the team here for the opportunity to speak. I'm always excited to pitch the story of how Citroniq Chemicals has come to creation and what we're trying to do. So what I'll try to do today is start a little bit with a level setting of talking about the whole petrochemical plastics global landscape and where things are going, and then talk a little bit about our journey of how we came into the ESG space and developed our project, and a little bit about our project. So, just once again, Kelly Knopp. I've got, after spending 38 years in the corporate world, I felt like I'd punched my ticket on the corporate life and decided to step out and wanted to do something in that ESG space. This was early 1990. Left the corporate world in March 2020. If you remember what was happening with COVID, so it was a great time to pull back and think a little bit about what I wanted to do. Teamed up with my partner, Mel Badeka, and created Citroniq Chemicals. Our project is really looking at taking ethanol and converting it into ethylene, into propylene, into polypropylene as a way to carbon capture biogenic carbon in corn into a useful pellet. But as we move forward, let's talk a little about just the global landscape of what the petchem world looks like. This is probably shouldn't be big news to anyone in here probably, but just to level set, if you look at the globe, the U.S. At one point in time, it looked like the petchem world was dead here. All the action was going to be in the Middle East and in Asia. And then we had a thing called fracking that happened, and suddenly we were back in the game with low-cost feedstock. And the LNG world has brought a lot of ethane to the game, and so I think we believe that that's going to continue on. We'll still continue to have a strong feedstock position here, as you can see, ethane exports and ethylene exports, and some of the other products that go out today. Polyethylene is roughly 40% of it is exported now. Any incremental new polyethylene plant in the U.S. is pretty much an export facility. And to kind of balance that out, China's on the other side of the spectrum, right? There's where a lot of the growth is, but it's built upon a low cost position on the construction side. They tend to be able to build these large petrochemical plants much cheaper, and that's why you see kind of the flow of feedstocks across the globe. And Europe is very interesting. Europe has become our laboratory for how is the future going to really look on carbon. They're pricing carbon credits now. They're regulated. U.S. is still a voluntary market, so it's going to be interesting to see how they really are our test case to see how this new low carbon environment really works. And they've paid some high prices for that so far, but we'll see how that plays out. And then the wild card I put in there is supply chain constraints over Panama. We've had the restrictions through the Panama Canal. The automatic assumption that we can efficiently move a lot of these products to wherever the low cost, high cost transition isn't a given anymore. And maybe you'll see a little less globalization than we've seen in the past as some of these constraints become bigger issues. You build on that. The whole talk yesterday was around what's going to happen on the low carbon environment. When we look at where the companies have laid out here as far as their goals, some companies are very aggressive, net zero by 2030, some by 2050, but it's a big goal. And I think the consensus yesterday was we're not going to get there. Even the 2050 goals look very challenging, and so the question there becomes what gives? Will we accelerate our ability to pull more carbon out, or are we going to relax the rules? Because once again, there's no laws here that require these companies to do it. And we've learned it in our business. There's a dichotomy. When we were looking at bringing sustainable plastics to the market, our thought was consumer pull. And so we were thinking about what customers are so environmentally sensitive they'll pay a premium, or they'll pay for this sustainable product. So for example, polypropylene, we thought a yogurt cup would be a great use, because it's typically a health-focused young clientele that maybe that would be interest. We haven't seen the consumer pull happen. What's happened is corporations have made goals and commitments to Wall Street. So now the question is, can they back off these goals, or will they be punished on Wall Street in their stock price? So it's really become a voluntary corporate commitment that's driving this business today. But something we'll have to give in the balance here, one way or the other. Someone's not going to meet their goal, or we're going to have to find some new technology or accelerate the rate at which we're developing projects. And this kind of ties back to that. I think yesterday you were saying that 60% of our energy is still coming from oil and gas. If you throw coal in there, call it a fossil fuel too, then you're looking at still 81% of your energy mix is still the old fossil fuels. And if you look at the progress we made, it feels like we made a lot of progress, but in the big scheme of things, I'm not sure it's been at a rate that's going to get us to where we need to be, especially when you factor in the demand growth for more energy. As third world countries develop, we see India as a huge energy sink in the future. So that makes an even bigger challenge. One way to think about it is since 2010 to 2020, I think it reduced from 84% to 82% roughly. So all the effort that was put in that decade pretty much covered the growth and a little bit. So it's very hard to say we're going to continue to make a lot of progress on this front. And I thought this was interesting. You hear a lot of people say plastics should go away. It's clearly a big waste issue, and people are addressing the waste issue. And when we started looking at sustainable plastics, making plastics from a renewable source, we had a lot of customers say, that's great, but really the waste issue is our job number one, and that's where they were really focused. And the challenge you see here is that this was a great article on how the world works, saying these four pillars are what modern civilization is built on, and there's really no clear substitute for any of them. I think steel and concrete are obvious. If you're going to build things, you need steel and concrete, and I don't. There may be low carbon ways to do that, and certainly steel. There is low carbon steel, but low is kind of a relative term. It's we see a lot of companies that are looking to be carbon negative, so now you have to make up something else carbon negative to cover some of these products. Plastics. There's been people that want to say we need to eliminate plastics. It really, from a environmental carbon footprint standpoint, it's a tough nut to crack because of the strength to weight ratio. So if you start replacing plastics with glass or aluminum, some other products, if you look at the whole life cycle of those products, transportation, making them, plastic still will come out as a winner in that, because it's got such unique properties that save you a lot of energy through that whole value cycle. So the issue really is the waste issue. That's what we've got to address. It's a great product. It's going to be here for a very long time. And ammonia is the smallest volume on there, but a lot of people argue that that's the most important one, because it's really the nitrogen-based fertilizers that really changed the game to feed 7 or 8 billion people in the world. the creation of urea and nitrogen-based fertilizers is when the correlation between tillable land and food production uncoupled, because today our yields continue to go up on food, but the tillable acres are somewhat flat. So you see that's a critical component in there. So the challenge here again is how do we continue to keep the lifestyle we have the developing world come into middle class and the rest of the economy, and still meet these goals on the right, which are pretty aggressive. And by the way, I'm not going to have answers for you there. That's you guys need to figure that out. But I do want to talk about our project a little. If any of you were here yesterday, the keynote speaker was Lydia from ExxonMobil. So, think of Citroniq as we're the opposite end of the spectrum from the ExxonMobil solution. She talked a lot about all the, wellhead to customer type breadth that they have, and the balance sheet that they have, that they can put these, multi-billion-dollar projects together, and her focus was all on return, that these projects have to compete for capital with other projects that they're doing, and they've got shareholder obligations. So very focused on the profitability side. We're a startup company. We're on the other end. We're dependent on private equity investment and debt. We don't have a balance sheet, so that brings a whole different dynamic and risk profile to the market. And we've had many people tell us, trying to be in the polypropylene business, whether we're sustainable or not. It's a game that's not normally played with startup companies, because your competition is building plants based on their own personal forecasts. They have done nothing in the market. They haven't locked in any margins. They're just going to their boards and saying, I think this is going to be a good project, and they sell it, and it goes. So, as a startup, you're not going to get that same leeway with private equity money. They're not going to take your word for it that the margins are going to go up. So you have to deal with all that. If you look at us, once again, we were founded in 2020. It's taken us 4 years to kind of get to our Series A first fundraising. We're a pure play. We're looking at taking really the ethanol industry. We look at that and we say that what a great biofeedstock. The whole supply chain is built out. The corn farmers are raising corn. There's elevators to store the corn through the year. There's an ethanol plant that's already making a high purity, 99.6% pure ethanol product. And then we're burning it in gasoline. So, we feel like converting that into a useful product and capturing that biogenic carbon in something that it doesn't get back into the atmosphere is a much better approach than just perpetuating that carbon cycle where you put it in your gasoline engine, you burn it, and it creates CO2 again, comes around in a full circle. So we've that's kind of our premise. We would have loved to come up with a small plant and not have to raise so much money and kind of put our toe in the water a little bit, but the economics don't work. As you guys know well, this is a scale business. You've got to really be able to spread your fixed costs across a lot of pounds to make the economics work and stay somewhat competitive with conventional products. So we had to pretty much look and say, what's world scale? We're gonna have to build that, because once again, if you do build it, the demand is there for these products at a competitive price. So we had to build upon that premise. And we'll talk a little about the technology we're using. All the technologies we're using have been built somewhere around the world at this scale, just never in this sequence. So we think the technology risk is very low. We've got an agreement with Lummus for all of our technology, one-stop technology provider, and we've signed a 4-plant, 7-year exclusive with them for North America, actually for US and Canada, to give us some runway. We feel very strong that if we can get this first one built, the follow-on demand will be very strong. And we based our project on no government support. Great programs out there with the IRA. The USDA has a loan guarantee program for biorefinery, biochemical plants, which would be right in the fairway of this. But when you look at these programs, they take a lot of time to apply for. You're uncertain when money will show up. There's a lot of strings tied to it. And we found it's very difficult to go get private equity money when you can't tell them your timing with certainty, or there's other things that control your timing. So we view that as an upside for us down the road, but we feel like our economics hang together without any government support. And once again, we're out for funding right now. The other thing I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about was our journey of how we got from a concept to really getting our development funding underway here. And if you look at trying to create a new product in this green space, how do I get to low carbon? And when we started, we were pretty open to say, where can we apply our knowledge and our experience in a way to create some value? So we thought about mechanical recycling, we thought about chemical recycling, we thought about the sustainable side where we're using a bio-based feedstock, which is where we ended up. But we tried to find some space where we could contribute and where we could bring some value. And the value we really wanted to bring was trying to integrate existing assets. One of the great strengths of North America is the incredible infrastructure that's in place today. The example I always use, I'm an old Williams Energy guy. Transco pipeline runs from South Texas into Manhattan. It used to stop at the New York Harbor. Now it goes actually into the city, and was built to take natural gas from Texas all the way to New York and every place along the way, going along the eastern seaboard, and did that for decades. And then a thing came along called fracking, and the Marcellus was created, and suddenly you're putting gas in Pennsylvania, and for a while there was a node, so you had gas flowing from two directions and matching in the middle, and now that node's moved all the way down to the LNG plants in Lake Charles. So you've got this tremendous asset that's been in the ground for a long time, totally being redeployed and reversed and going in another direction. And so we think of that as an analogy for what we're looking at on the ethanol side of taking plants that were built in the 1980s. The government got involved to create a secure energy source for gasoline, thinking we're going to run out of crude, right? So they were looking at peak oil. We're going to run out of oil. We're going to run out of gas. We're going to import gas into the U.S. And so the premise for those plants all through the Midwest has changed a lot. And so we think this is a great redeployment. But if you look at where to start, you start with market demand. And we hear a lot, and the kind of the catchphrase we heard for a long time was people want sustainable products, they just don't want to pay for them. And McKinsey had a study that showed, asked people what they would pay, and people over 50 would pay nothing. People between their 30s and 40s would pay a little, and people in their 20s and teens would pay a substantial amount. The only problem is people in their teens and 20s don't have any money. All the money's with the old guys. So that there's a dynamic there that said, well, is that buyer attitude going to change over time, or will other things drive that? So you definitely have to think about a price point. We're looking at our pricing as roughly a 20% premium above conventional polypropylene, and that's kind of a point that 2 years ago most buyers of polypropylene were telling us that was too much, and they probably wouldn't be interested. Today, that's not a hard sell as the reality of 2030 comes into play. And one of the interesting dynamics we've seen is, you start to get into the personal motivations of people. our most success has been end of year, December this last year, December the prior year, because people's personal goals are somewhere on their goals and within the corporation is, what are you doing to help us meet these lower carbon footprint goals by 2030? And suddenly people are coming back to us late in the year saying, yeah, I got to get something done. I need to, let's talk about what an LOI might look like. So we do see that corporate pressure to get results, and clearly most of these corporations are behind of where you think they would be. The other concept that we really brought, so say we need a 20% premium on conventional polypropylene price to make our project work. We originally started out talking about a green premium, and that's a hard sell, right? Because people are, I don't want to pay more for a product even though it has some better attributes. And kind of what we learned over time is it really isn't a premium. What happens is we're selling two products. We're selling pellets that are a drop-in product, that whether it's biogenic carbon or fossil fuel carbon, that plastic is exactly the same. So it should be worth whatever the market price for that grade of plastic. That extra price above that, that's your carbon credit. So as what we're bringing with that is, through our life cycle analysis, we're showing how much carbon we're capturing or avoiding compared to conventional polypropylene. And for us, it's roughly a 5 to 1. So there's about 5 tons of CO2 either captured or avoided using ethanol as a feedstock versus conventional fossil fuels. And so that's a big number. And that starts to really move the needle. So you can reverse calculate that and say, what's that worth dollars per ton for that carbon reduction? And for us, it's maybe in that $70 a ton type range to make that work. Now you've probably seen numbers. We've seen numbers from $5 a ton to $500 a ton, depending on the quality of your carbon credit. And we'll talk a little more about where those carbon credits are. But that's a so that's a fungible product that over time is going to become much easier to price, and it becomes just another product. It's really not a premium. Somebody will pay you for that. And the other challenge we've had is just the reality of, is it truly a drop-in product? Everyone wants to test our product, and that's hard because we don't have a plant yet, and so we're working off pilot plant data and samples. The other's the technology risks. There's a lot of new technology in this space, and when you're looking at getting funded from the market, they don't like technology risk, and the more debt you want, banks really don't like technology risk. So we had to really look hard and find a way to use some technologies that are established. The other is scale-up risk. If you're bringing small scale to full scale, for us, we were able to find reference plants and using the same technologies, but those are big. And then project execution is huge. Once we came through, if people remember the whole COVID time, commodity prices were moving all over. Labor costs are tough right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and for a development project like ours, we need to make it look as much like a lump sum turnkey project as we can, because we don't have the balance sheet to take swings in there. And the last is the whole credibility question about, is it green? There's been so much greenwashing. People have oversold a lot of the concepts, and so we found that as a battle that you need to be able to really prove it's green. For us, the differentiator is we're going to be a pure play. So we're only using ethanol as our feedstock. So there's no fossil fuels inside the pipe. So what we come out with is 100% sustainable carbon in that pellet, and there's an ASTM test that you can use to quantify biogenic carbon versus fossil fuel carbon that's been in the ground a million years, and that's just carbon-14 dating, just like carbon dating they use for, archaeologists use. So you can actually run a test. So a customer of ours could receive a rail car of polypropylene, take a handful of those pellets, go to the lab, run the ASTM test, and prove that it's biogenic. And so what that does is that takes a lot of the greenwashing, a lot of other processes. Today, for example, for biopolypropylene, the only other biopolypropylene being made today are a couple, European, Middle East producers that take a little bit of biogenic propylene that's coming off, say, a biodiesel plant. If you take, for example, cooking oil, you crack it to make biodiesel, you're going to make just a little bit of ethylene, a little bit of propylene as a byproduct. So they're taking a very small volume, just putting it into a conventional polypropylene plant, so you know that 1% or 2% of the output is biogenic. And then you go to ISCC and you get them to certify your process, run a material balance, and you say X amount that I sell you, that's the sustainable part, that's the biogenic part. But once again, there's nothing about those pellets you get that are going to tell you that, because it's just a material balance. So a lot of companies are nervous about that, right? What if they got the calculations wrong? What if they double dip? Those kind of things. So we found being able to track that and be able to self-certify that you truly are biogenic, that's a big piece. The other big piece for us has been getting our carbon credits certified as true carbon credits through the formal market. That's kind of the first step to being able to quantify them and sell them on the market, because we could actually separate these two, right? You could end up making a bio PP, just sell it into the polypropylene market as polypropylene, take the credit, sell it to the highest bidder. We've seen that with SAF. Microsoft announced where they were buying credits to cover their aviation carbon footprint. Microsoft's not flying planes, but their people are flying all over the world, and they wanted to be carbon neutral, so they could buy these SAF credits, and they paid a big price for them, but it makes them carbon neutral. Then that producer is going to sell that as just conventional aviation fuel. So you can separate these two products, and over time this market is going to become much more quantifiable and much more of a fungible product out there. And the last part on sustainability I would comment on is size matters. Trying to get a customer comfortable. If you're building something small and they're a big percentage of your output, then they're worried about how reliable you're going to be, what's going to happen when you have turnarounds or your outages. So our focus is build world scale, get to that second plant as quick as you can, so that you've got redundancy and you've got coverage if you have outages, things like that, because you have to be a reliable supplier end of the day, especially when you're trying to blaze a trail. We've worked hard with automotive groups, and they're ready to take, say, a 2028 model year and use our polypropylene to make all the door panels for their pickups. Well, if they do that, they want to make sure that product's there when they need it, because they want to be able to publicize that and use that and promote that. Yeah, let's talk a little about, and I mentioned this a little bit, but where are the hot applications that really are interested in sustainable products? Like I said, we thought it would be consumer driven, and for polypropylene, maybe diapers would be a big market, because young mothers are environmentally sensitive. That's a good market for us, and we're developing that market. But the one that really came to the fore was the automotive, and we thought, polypropylene is 200 to 300 pounds out of a 2,000, 3,000 pound car, so it's maybe 10% of the car's weight. So if we bring a sustainable product, you're not really moving the needle that much on that car. But the automotive folks are so sensitive right now about their carbon footprint and our 5-to-1 ratio. So suddenly, if we can bring five pounds of carbon reduction for every pound of polypropylene, suddenly that levers that much into a much bigger way, and it goes back to the steel and aluminum issues again, that you're not going to go carbon negative, we're carbon negative, so that brings some balance there. And so we've seen that really pick up, and that's big volume. The thing we like about it is it's a durable good, so the plastics waste issue is less of a concern there, and so that's been a big focus for us. And real quick on the recycled market, just to give you some thought about what we've seen, the material change is, polypropylene is in that 5 to 8% recycled today, and that number's, coming up slower than people thought it would, especially on this is on the mechanical recycling side. The sorting has been a big issue, the cost of that. So we've seen a lot of folks that 2 years ago told us, no, we're really focused on bringing recycled polypropylene. We're not interested in a renewable. Had come back around. The other was the price is not correlated to the polypropylene price. A lot of our customers are asking us if we can stay correlated, even though ethanol and polypropylene don't correlate. So we've got some cross commodity risk that we have to manage. And one thing we're doing is a lot of the ethanol producers that we're working with are interested in a corn plus type pricing to get them out of the volatility that they see in the gasoline market. Today, ethanol follows the gasoline supply demand seasonally, so in the winter it gets really tough, and the summer it's really strong. So they like the idea of being able to just cut a coupon, and our customers like that. Anybody in the food business is already using food packaging. For example, a snack food guy that's making snack food wrap out of polypropylene, they're already in the corn business because of corn oil. They understand that commodity, and so being able to do a corn-based product on both sides for us is very attractive, and then we're on purpose. The mechanical recycling is still a tough game. You don't really know what volumes are going to come at you. They're buying bundled plastics and then sorting them out. So one of the angles that we've really worked hard with is to be a supplement to the recycled material, because you can't recycle plastics infinitely anyway. You may only get a couple cycles before it degrades. So you need virgin material, and we think no better virgin material than a sustainable product. And just real quick on our product highlights of what happens once we're a drop-in product. We call it market parity because once again, we're looking for about a 20% higher price than conventional polypropylene, but we view that as the value of that carbon credit. If somebody doesn't want to pay that, we'll work with them to maybe monetize it some other way. We're 100% sustainable, pure product. It is a true carbon capture utilization because we are taking that CO2 that gets in the corn, turning it into a solid pellet that we were going to use for a very long time and not bring back into the atmosphere. And once again, we're world scale. How are we doing on time? Do you want to transition to some Q&A pretty soon, or just?
Yeah, you can still take a couple more minutes.
Okay, good. Well, we'll talk about the technology just a little bit. We've aligned ourselves up with Lummus. Lummus has had several of these technologies for a very long time. If I work from the backwards, polypropylene, they have Novolan polypropylene technology, which is very big in Middle East and Asia, less so in the US. But we view it as a great opportunity. It's really a legacy BASF technology that BASF developed, and about 20 years ago, Lummus purchased and has marketed since then. The metathesis and dimerization in the middle are also long-time Lummus technologies that have been built many times around the world. And really the game changer for us was the ethanol to ethylene technology. There was really until April of 2022, there was no proven technology you could go buy off the shelf. here. This is Braskem's technology used in Brazil. They've had that plant running for about 12 years. They just expanded it from 200 KTA to 260. So it's a full world scale type operation. There's other technology providers, for example, Technip, Axons, that have the similar technology, but they're on license number 1. And license number 1 is around 30 KTA instead of the 400 KTA that we're looking at. So pretty big scale up risk. Braskem came to the market in April of 22, so that was when we really lined up with Lummus and was able to put a package together to bring these 4 technologies together into one package. So you might say, what's a little startup like Citroniq bring to a big technology provider like Lummus? And what we were able to do is say, we'll move quickly, we'll help you take these 4 and create a 5th. Right? Now you'll have a technology off the shelf that you'll be able to present to the market that takes you from one end to the other. This is really simplistic, but there's not a lot of byproducts out of it. It's very catalytically driven. If you think about making ethylene, conventional ethylene's thermal cracking, think big heaters with 2,000 degrees and a lot of CO2 being generated. By doing something catalytic, we're not nearly in that same range of temperatures and pressures and emissions. So it's a very selective process. We come out with 99.99% pure ethylene. The big downside of this is that you pay good money for ethanol, and first step is you turn 40% of it into water. So you got to think mentally about, you're kind of paying double for your ethanol to do this. What we're working at is to keep it a water positive process, because we're looking at building this in Nebraska, and the aquifers are very important there. If you want to get more water, you're probably taking off aquifer water. So anything we can do to minimize our water use, we're looking at. And so what happens then is you take ethylene, you dimerize it into butene, and you add more ethylene. You take a C4 and a C2, and you make C3s. And so you come out with a very high purity propylene. The other advantage that this process has that sometimes isn't real obvious is if you think about conventional hydrocarbons. Today you buy an NGL stream and you fractionate it out, but when you bring in ethane to make ethylene and ethylene are pretty tough to separate. You bring in propane and do PDH and make propylene, less than 1 degree boiling point separation, so you end up with these huge towers, huge fractionation. There's no ethane, no propane here, so all your separating ethylene and water is pretty easy. There's nothing that's really tough separation in here, so you also keeps your footprint a little simpler. And we talked about technology a little bit. So location, we want to align ourselves close to the ethanol industry and bring in some logistical advantages, because if any of you've done a life cycle assessment, the world's changed. We used to just worry about everything within our plant. Feedstock came to the plant fence, product went out the plant fence, and you were kind of responsible for everything in there. The new world is now you're responsible from the generation of that, whatever your feedstock is, all the way through to your plant, and it kind of stops at your gate. So for example, for us, we're having to measure our carbon footprint from the farmer that's running the tractor to put the corn in the ground, through the truck that moves the corn, through the ethanol processor that's making CO2 from his process, all the way through the emissions from our process. So you have to look at that whole cycle, and then we compare that against, really our measure is against propane dehydrogenation, because if you look at the propylene value chain, 80% of it globally is byproduct from refineries or chemical plants, so that's going to be there and that's going to come out. But those two supplies are flat to declining. And so as the demand for things like polypropylene and other propylene derivatives continues to grow, you got to say, where's the next molecule of propylene come from? And it's from propane dehydrogenation, which is a very complicated process. The operating rates have been low, capital costs have been high. That's why, as we looked at different derivatives, we focused in on polypropylene because that was the most competitive point we could make using ethanol as a feedstock. When we looked at comparing, for example, a lot of people ask us, well, why didn't we just make polyethylene? That'd be a lot lower capital cost. You just would go ethanol to ethylene and put a polyethylene plant, you'd be done, because you're competing against conventional, which has a much lower price point. So this was the best point for us to hit. So then as we looked around, okay, where's the right place to locate? That carbon footprint, anything we can shrink down. So we've got a site in Blair, Nebraska, which is right north of Omaha, fence line with a large Cargill ethanol plant. And so when we look at that carbon footprint, getting out of rail cars and into a pipeline is a big plus for both Cargill and us. Saves a lot of transportation costs. And if you look at where they're getting their corn to supply that ethanol, it's within a 70-mile radius. So you've suddenly shrunk that carbon footprint where a lot of that ethanol is going to the big demand centers, right? It's going to Texas, going to California, Chicago. We've compressed all that logistics out of the play. The other thing we found was construction in Nebraska. They don't build a lot of big petrochemical plants, so there's some risk there. It's not the U.S. Gulf Coast where all the labor is and skilled labor. So we wanted to locate close to a navigable river. The Missouri River, connects to the Mississippi. We would be able to bring modules up. We're within a little over a mile from the water, and so we're really looking at doing a lot of modular build in shop so that we avoid the weather issues, we avoid the labor issues, some things like that. So we're excited about our plant site. As we move from plant 1 to 2 to 3, we're looking for other synergistic opportunities to build somewhere in the Midwest here and go from there. And as we build our company out, we've added an engineering team. Antoine's right here front and center, so we're excited about being able to bring a contiguous team that's worked together before. As you build a new company, you want to go out and hire the best people you can, but if you start to hire individuals, you don't really know how they're going to work as a team. So this was really big for us. We're right in that last mile of funding. So as we get funded, we've got some pretty good staffing plans in place, and we're really launching into our formal feed process. And kind of the last quick point I'll make is just, and this is an obvious one, but plastics demand is growing, and it's growing at GDP, and it's growing in a big way globally as you see a lot of the developing countries start to get into disposable goods and into really durable goods too. And so the challenge here is not just replacing fossil fuels, but you're on a moving target. So that target's growing all the time, and so that's one of the real challenges we see. Is we need big projects like this. We're looking at plant 1. It's roughly 2 million tons a year of CO2 that's either captured or avoided, and those are the numbers that we need. If we do small scale plants, we're just never going to keep up, even with the demand growth. And real quickly, once again, we have this 5-to-1 carbon capture that we have is a combination of a couple things. When people think about the carbon footprint, they instantly think about, combustion and putting CO2 in the air. And so we start out in a positive position because we're producing some CO2 as we run our plant and the ethanol plants run. But we're overcome that instantly with the carbon capture that we do with just the carbon in the corn itself. The corn to ethanol to polypropylene, we've already position ourselves in a negative position, and then to reach the 5-to-1 is really the avoidance, because then we look at a conventional, crude and gas production through a propane dehydrogenation through a conventional polypropylene plant. and we take credit for that avoidance, because every pellet we make means that a conventional plant won't have to run. And maybe I'll stop there. Maybe the last point I'll make is our European friends hit us up on this all the time about we're taking corn out of the food market, and we really feel like we aren't. And one reason is, if you look at what happens in an ethanol plant, they recover the corn oil, which is used in food. The gluten and the protein is concentrated into what they call, distiller's grain, which is animal feed. So it ends up in your steaks. And so really all they're using is the starch, which is the lowest valued part of the corn. And so if you really think about it, about half of that corn kernel is staying in the food market. And if you look at how things roll up today, roughly, this is 2021 data, roughly 10% of the tillable ground in the US is in corn. About 35% of that corn goes to ethanol. And so when we look at this 18 billion gallon a year ethanol market, it's declining as gasoline demand declines. We fit well within just the unused capacity that we see in the market today. And we really feel the bottom line is we're pulling ethanol out of gasoline, not out of the food market. I may stop there.
Sure, sounds good, Kelly. Maybe join me here, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions,
Sure.
Kelly, and then we can open this up. We're running a bit behind, but that's okay. We can take it's an interesting project. So maybe I'll cut to the chase, right? Is there a difference in the product properties? Like, polypropylene has multiple grades. A lot of the demand actually a lot of the demand growth, about GDP demand growth, is actually in the specialized grades of polypropylene, as you probably know well, right? So I'm curious, I guess, how much flexibility does the process offer you in terms of altering across different polypropylene grades?
That's a challenge, especially a new entrant in the market, in that, for example, the technology, there's roughly 200 grades that you can make, and some of them are basic commodity grades. And then for automotive, for example, a lot of them are fairly technical, where you're having to bring co-monomer, hydrogen, different component, rubberized products that give you flexibility. And as a new startup, we want to say yes to everyone, right? But we can't make 200 grades. We can make maybe 10 to 15 grades. So we've had to be very strategic about which grades we're going to make and whether we can achieve those grades, because it'll take us a while to run. We think a 6-month ramp up on basic commodity grades to be able to start to make more complex grades. But those are the grades that the automotive guys want. So we really see a blend of automotive grades and food packaging grades is kind of our core business.
Okay. Are you concerned that there is excessive polypropylene capacity? I mean, I clearly understand the value proposition of green polypropylene, right? I mean, that is a huge differentiator. I understand that. But as you know, right, I mean, there's a significant amount of polypropylene capacity that was built in China from all the coal and TO plants. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, one answer is we're looking at 2027 startup. And so between now and then, there's not as much growth as there was in the last 3 to 4 years. So some of that overhang is going to get consumed. And we think polypropylene gets tighter quicker than polyethylene. I think polyethylene is even a longer road to get balanced, because there's been so much overbuild. But at the end of the day, what we've found is it's almost like a binomial kind of mixture. There's customers that are interested in the product, but they're really not motivated. And then there's a certain number of customers that are very motivated that say, I've got to get my carbon footprint lower, to the point when we see somebody that sells us, we want to make a carbon negative product. They're a little, they're even farther down the road than other people. And so those are the customers that we're really focused on, that we can fill this first plant up with some very, what I call motivated partners.
Yeah. On the technology side, I mean, this is it's probably a new process, definitely to the US, but actually this route is being practiced. I think there are a couple of plants in Singapore that Sumitomo runs, for example. Sumitomo is also actually doing some work internally on trying to develop a one-step process, right? I mean, I guess from a technology risk point of view, what are you hearing from investors? Do you feel that that is still a question on their minds, or there is?
It's always a question, and especially like on the banks, because they're very risk averse. What we can do is, once again, 400 KTA polypropylene plant, that is right off the shelf. So, we're able to speed up our engineering a little bit, and that Lummus is able to provide us go-bys, P&IDs and drawings that we can kind of get a jump start with our engineering on, because it's been built somewhere around the world at that size, which takes much less modification. Obviously putting in different location, different engineering standards perhaps, but minor changes. If you take the dimerization and metathesis, metathesis has been built 50 times. It's very proven the same way. The challenge was the ethanol to ethylene, because there's just one plant, reference plant, that's around 260. We're looking at around 450. So it's almost like you could think of it as two parallel trains would be one way for us to do that. That takes the risk out, but that's not your engineering optimum. So we're looking at how do we manage that scale up risk, but it's really pretty minor. So we've seen a little pushback there, but compared to a lot of the other processes that are trying to develop green products, is pretty low technology risk.
Okay. So a lot of calls on ethanol. People want to take ethanol, make alcohol to jet, for example, and then do you see that as a concern?
Yes, it's funny because I always say the ethanol producers, they're definitely in the FOMO thing, fear of missing out, because they've got all kinds of people knocking on their door wanting to make SAF and biodiesel, and they got us talking about plastics. So they know there's some attractive alternatives out there. And they know that gasoline demand will continue to decline. And so their alternatives are to export, which is, a costly option for them. So we've seen them get locked up a little bit with all the options that they have. Our differentiation is by capturing that carbon in a pellet. Everything else is going to combust it. Whether you're making SAF or you're putting it in gasoline today, it's still getting burned, and that carbon is still being released into the atmosphere. So
it comes back to that carbon negative value proposition.
Yeah, the CCU, because the other opportunity they have is the big pipelines, to capture their CO2 and make a low carbon ethanol. And those projects are taking more time than what they thought. So we bring at least a solution that's a little nearer term.
Yeah. I mean, as a project developer, you're probably super laser focused on the first plant, so the question that I'm going to ask is more long term. But do you think that there is enough ethanol capacity? Like, let's say we fast forward and you're back here in 10, 15 years, right? And you're building plant 10, and let's say the first set of SAF, alcohol to jet SAF plants are there. Do you think there's enough ethanol production capacity from a feedstock point of view to say significantly scale up? I mean, right now there's about 20% of ethanol capacity is underutilized, right? Because ethanol is capped out, right? From a gasoline blending point of view. So I can definitely see sufficient ethanol for, let's say, the next 5-10 years. But I'm just curious, have you thought beyond that to see what?
We have, and once again, building it full scale, we're roughly need about 250 million gallons a year of ethanol, which if you look in the Midwest, the plants run 50 million gallons to 150. So we kind of equate to like 3 mid-sized ethanol plants for each plant. So if we build 4 of these, we're at 1 billion gallons. So we're starting to really move the needle a little bit. The way we kind of look at it is redeploying existing assets is job one here into a higher value use. I think we'll find this as a higher value use. And so within our line of sight for 4 plants, we feel very good about the corn ethanol market. We think longer term, you talk about 10 years, we could get back into the ethanol plant growth, but I don't think it'll be on corn. It'll be sugarcane, it'll be Gen 2 if they get the cellulosic technology figured out. I mean, there's a big interest in that, but the economics just don't work. So I think you could end up longer term. Now, if you look at Brazil's still building ethanol plants. So another option is bringing sugarcane ethanol out of Brazil and building somewhere in the world. You don't have to build in the U.S. necessarily. But.
How do you think of hedging this? I mean, the feedstock and the product, you talked about this a little bit, are both, the price setting mechanisms for both of them are very different, right? I mean, NGLs inside out. So, but how do you think of hedging that, right? I mean, NGL supply is also growing rapidly. We think that propane prices are going to be pretty challenged here in the U.S. for the next few years. So I'm curious, how do you think of?
It's an interesting market. If you think about polyethylene or polypropylene, historically there's been this crazy risk absorption. At one end, you've got oil and gas that are being traded by the second, and those commodity prices are deep and they're moving all over the place. And then at the other end, you got our friend Walmart, who says, I need 24-month pricing, fixed pricing. And so somebody in the middle of that chain is absorbing tremendous amount of price risk. And there's no easy way to hedge it because of the whole variety of feedstocks. It's ethane, it's propane, it's butane, and none of those have much of a paper market. So what the dilemma has always been, people look for some way to manage that price risk between the ultimate customer and what's happened so far is a lot of the big guys in the middle absorb that through price protection, and they're just wearing it. What we see, one of the opportunities here is by tying corn to polypropylene. They're not common commodities, but corn is a deep product, and this is a perfect hedge because that's the only feedstock we have. So now you can do things like, maybe all we need to do is put a collar on to protect ourselves from a drought. Say, for example, if the corn spikes, you're protected on the extremes, but as long as you're within the normal range, we'll be okay. Some thoughts like that, or just being able to lock corn in for a 12-month period and offer polypropylene on a fixed price. So we think corn gives us actually more opportunity because it's a cleaner hedge. I guess is a quick way to think about it.
No, that's helpful. I'll open this up, but one last question. So, I mean, you've had a long corporate career. I actually didn't realize, Kelly, until this morning. I was looking you up on LinkedIn that you started in Bartlesville.
I did.
So did I. I started my career for Phillips 66 in Bartlesville. So, but you've had a long corporate career, and then the last few years as a project developer. I guess what are probably the top 2 or 3 things that you learned as a project developer that you hadn't already known from your corporate career?
It's funny, you reach the end of your career. I've had people tell me, it's a game at the end of your career. Are they going to fire you? You're going to fire them because you kind of reach that point where you're not as accommodating to move and accommodating to do all the things you want. I knew at the end, after 38 years, I knew that I wasn't ready to go play golf, right? So it's like I've spent all these years developing knowledge and skills. I wanted to do something with it, and I didn't. And what I really wanted to do was build something. And these businesses, it's hard to build something for less than $1 billion. So that became problematic. But what I've learned is, it's such a great industry. The NGL olefins business is that you've got high quality people that are doing sophisticated businesses. So everything is done so well. That's been such a great resource to be able to pull back into and have the contacts and the knowledge to be able to put something together.
Excellent, terrific. Let me open this up, see if there are questions. Lots of hands going up, but we have time, so we'll take these questions.
Yeah, thanks. That's Here, I'm here, Jane Chang.
Yeah.
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you for that. For two questions. First of all, is the ethanol production is part of your overall project, or are you taking ethanol as a feedstock?
Yeah, so we're just going to buy ethanol.
Okay.
But we have found great traction in being able to structure a corn plus so that it feels more like you're back integrated. But we think about, well, should we go buy an opportunistic ethanol plant? But then you're in the animal feed business.
Right.
Half of the products are going out as animal feed. So it's like I'm not sure that's in our core competency. So we think alignment with some key ethanol producers is a way to go.
Right. Then the follow-up question is regarding the 5 tons carbon CO2 captured or avoided. Part of those CO2s are going to be captured out of the ethanol production
Correct.
stream, right? So where are those CO2 go?
Where's that? Well, what we do is we take a penalty for that, right? So what we did is we based that 5-to-1 on just a conventional ethanol plant, not on like a low carbon plant, because I think you're going to see, especially we see in Nebraska, people are looking, if they can get their Class 6 permit, they make such a high purity CO2 waste stream that they may be able to inject it on site. So some of these guys won't depend on these pipelines. So there's an opportunity to get our number even lower if we were to line up with a low carbon ethanol producer. But we've taken the hit in that number of just that's just going to go to the atmosphere because we don't know what it's worth. A low carbon ethanol guy today wants to charge you 30 cents a gallon more because he can sell it in California for that. And we don't know what that's worth in our process because we're already carbon negative.
Over here.
Oh.
Yeah, hi. Kevin Howard from Heat Path Solutions. As you were describing the carbon reduction count, et cetera, I noticed you spoke about everything in the pipeline going through the process, but you didn't talk about all the utilities to run the process.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear your comments.
Yeah, no, that's, when we started, we were grandiose visions. Being a old Williams guy, I was very familiar with Conway, Kansas, where there's 70 underground salt dome storage wells. So, our first thought was, man, we're going to use 100% renewable energy, wind and solar, and we're going to build an electrolyzer and make hydrogen, use salt dome storage and store energy, and we're just going to be the greenest of green things until you start running the numbers and you realize how much that's going to cost. And so what we've based our project on is a conventional cogen running conventional natural gas, and within that 5-to-1, we're taking the hit for that. So we've got the emissions, and we'd love to have some creative concepts of how to get that number down. The challenge we had is that we could buy power from the local utility and get about a 30% green, renewable power within just buying it off the grid. But now I still have to make steam. And once you have to make steam, cogen suddenly becomes so competitive, or so attractive that you end up going that route. So we're very pragmatic. I mean, we're not trying to get as green. We'd love to get as green as we can, but we also have to meet our price point.
Yeah, Roman Wolf. First, great presentation. Love some of the slides. They almost look familiar to me. But I had a couple of questions. Coming from the old biofuels a few years back, when we used to move a biofuel into something that wasn't a fuel, you lost all the RINs and all these other benefits. Yeah. How are you dealing with that, or are you dealing with that? Because it's sort of a big hit. If it still works that way.
I don't know. We're trying to deal with it, I guess is what I would say. That's one of the opportunities we have is working with the local senators in the Midwest to get some legislation to get a RIN-like value, because we work with the AFCC to get some legislation, because it feels like a fair game would be to give us the same kind of opportunities that the fuel folks have had.
Chemicals are better
Right, even better.
And we get 3 to 4. So
Yeah,
that's the goal.
yeah. So we're working diligently on that.
Kelly over here. First off, thank you for the presentation. And I'm from Michael Lutter from Phillips 66. So cool to hear about the shared heritage Phillips background.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the value proposition of going to polypropylene instead of polyethylene. I know you mentioned your view is that there's more of a supply overhang longer term on the polyethylene side. Is there anything else that factors into making that extra conversion to polypropylene besides just the global supply?
Yeah, a couple things. One is the heavy export component. If you look at incrementally polyethylene, 40%, probably more than 40% goes export, and so you think about an incremental pellet, you really get yourself into an export world where polypropylene is pretty much in balance in North America. It's a little bit export, a little bit import, but probably the biggest thing was really looking at that cost position versus PDH. And that today polypropylene, polyethylene prices are kind of in parity, both long, both ugly, but we think propylene is going to be a key molecule going forward, and that keeps us competitive. When we started looking at, it's really the competitive position versus PDH, I guess would be the answer.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Good morning. Yes, sorry. My name is Jay, and I'm from Air Products. First of all, I really enjoyed your presentation. I had 2 questions. Stemming from his question, I saw a few slides ago that you showed like from 2010 to 2040, it was pretty much a lot of growth in polypropylene. But do you see this market as cycling at all in the interim, or is it straight shot, growth? That was my first
question.
I
think we're short term. We're in straight growth because I think the builds happened. So China's built a lot of plants. U.S. we've had several big Exxon, Braskem both brought big polypropylene plants up in the last couple of years. So I think the overhang's here, and now we're on a recovery. Once margins improve, the history of this business says we'll overbuild again, right? So I don't think the petrochemical cycle is going to disappear, but it's more on that 6-7 year kind of time frame. So there'll be hard times again in the future, but I think we'll also see some pretty good years in there too.
Okay, and the second part was kind of a question/comment. You mentioned much earlier in your presentation that you see biopropylene being driven more by companies rather than by consumers. You spoke about the example of a yogurt cup. A couple of slides ago, you had a very simplistic slide showing, basically bioethanol being sequestered into plastic.
Yeah.
What has been done to educate the average consumer so far? I mean, for me, for example, if I picked up that cup of yogurt and I saw this made sustainably from corn, I wouldn't think about a few cents extra. What is being done today about that?
Yeah, that's a great question because our anticipation was that being able to present this product to any of these consumer users, and another great example is McDonald's. Your clear plastic soda cup that you get at McDonald's, that's polypropylene. They've got a test run they're doing in Savannah, Georgia today. The McDonald's in Savannah are running on 100% recycled polypropylene. The problem is if it works and people love it, how do you scale that up? There's not enough recycled polypropylene to make that work, right? So they've got a challenge, but those companies are big about putting that on the label, right? They're going to show that it's there, but that's been slow coming. We've been surprised how slow the consumer good folks are at embracing it, and it's pretty much been driven by the corporate edicts. But we think the future's bright on that. Some of it's education, some of it's getting, some of it's just getting products like this at the right scale, because it's big. It's a big on-off switch. You have to get at least, I don't know what the percentage is, 30 or 40% renewable to call something green, and they love when it's 100% renewable. But you're talking about a lot of pounds of product to convert something like a McDonald's cup, for example. So it is a scale issue still.
Alrighty, we'll wrap this up here. Let's give Kelly a hand.
Thank you. Thank you.